This is another oral history with Jim Kelly, and we're meeting in his retirement home. And the date today is December 10th, 2003. And my name is Dorothy Charlo, and the videographer is Hannah Nordhaus. Thank you so much, Jim, for agreeing to yet another interview.
Okay.
Well, we wanted to ask, in going over some of the oral histories that you've already done, it seemed as though you feel that the union had a pretty big impact at Rocky Flats. And we were wondering, do you think it had an impact in terms of protecting the safety?
Oh, absolutely. It was a fight from the very beginning with Dow Chemical Company, which for a period of years from about 1967 until 1970 got so bitter it got to the congressional level, which in 1970 in April we were called to the offices of the Joint Committee on Atomic Energy, and we had a session there where they brought the 3 AEC commissioners over, and fortunately the people from Congress on that committee agreed with us that we had a right to have equal say in safety. And that was the beginning, and that was fought very bitterly by Dow and by the AEC. They did not want, either one of them wanted an equal committee, nor did they want a formal program, a written out and agreed to program. We insisted on both, that it had to be formalized and it had to be agreed and signed, otherwise they wouldn't live with it. Congress agreed with that and ordered the AEC to call Dow into those meetings, and we worked out a summary in the congressman's offices on how the steps would be. It was about a 6 or 7 step procedure. We spent quite a bit of time on the final step because we were insisting on arbitration as the final step. They did not like arbitration idea at all. I then proposed to them that we use the General Sam Donnelly as the arbitrator, who was in the process, in the AEC process. He was the overall manager at Albuquerque and Los Alamos. The congressman agreed with that. They forced that over Dow. Dow and AEC didn't want that either. But the congressional people said, we're going to have that. So they sent me back with an agreed to summary of a 7-step program. And we were to have negotiations the following morning back in Denver. When I got back, I was met with heavy resistance by the company and by the AEC. Although the AEC did call the meeting the next morning, they handed me a whole different write-up, which was really next to nothing. So I put it down on the table and I said, you were told different than this, and I walked out. And they called me back about 2 hours later, and they had half of it. And I said, yeah, now you got half. You call me back in a couple hours with the other half, and we'll get something going. So they did. They called me back again, and they still were whittling on it. And I said, look, you know what you were told to do. You've got a copy of it. And that's the bottom line. And, so at 5:30 that night, we signed it. They have not liked it ever since. But it gave us,
meaning
it gave
the
us,
contractors
it gave
and
us
the-
each side a committee of 3 with a co-chairman, and equal responsibility, freedom to go about it work, and
What protection does that give the workers? Can you talk a little bit about that?
well, there was literally hundreds of safety rules laid down by the government themselves, and there were the usual rules that were just a part of the nuclear industry. Then there were, of course, the company's rules, which they violated on a daily basis, as well as violating most of the other ones. It brought all of that back into the picture, and we had a formal safety complaint form, and we began filing them, one after another, on all these accrued violations. And 2 or 3 of them wound up in Albuquerque, and they were resolved in our favor by the general. And then he came up here. And I guess he must have given him a talking to and said, you know, the days that you're used to is over with. We've agreed not to resist this. Plus, he was a wise enough man to know that it was in their best interest, too, not to have people getting exposed or hurt any more than they were going to be in the natural run of a job like that. So it went along pretty good, and then...
Do you think that the change in that came about in part because of some of the problems that had been found in the creeks?
Yeah, I blew the whistle on the creek. I'm the guy that blew the whistle.
Oh, you did?
Walnut Creek and Old Woman's Creek. That's why I was back there in 1970. When those complaints got in the hands of Congressman Hollifield from California. He was a chairman. John Pastore, the senator from Rhode Island, was the alternating chairman from the U.S. Senate. And they paid attention to it. So I was called into their office to explain, and I had all of the paperwork with me, and I had to be very careful because my sources, were under the gun. If any way they would have been able to detect where I was getting my information. So I kind of...
That your sources were some of the workers that were reporting to you
right,
problems.
and of course, it wouldn't be too hard for them normally because of the locations and who worked those locations at various times. So I had to really do a daisy dance to kind of fictionalize times and things so they wouldn't be able to zero in on, on any particular person. And we got that done, and they didn't. They weren't able to figure out who was doing it. Well, it was a bunch of people that was doing it. And so before they got a chance to really, they were warned. And I told the congressman, I said, if any of these people, if they find out who they are or anything, they'll gun them down. They'll go get them right away. So when they got there,
they would
fire
them,
yeah.
Not just harass them.
So when they got there, before they even got started, he told them, he said, there's a number of people probably involved in a situation like this. And we're warning you right now that there better not be any reprisals, any discipline, any repercussions, any threats, or any harassment. And if you don't understand those words, there's a few others in the dictionary we can give you. And they all just sat there and had sour looks on their face. So we got through that, but when they seen what I had, how widespread it was, the congressman got mad. He got mad and said, we paid you people to keep that stuff inside. And at the same time, I was also blowing the whistle on the trenches.
The trenches,
And he really lost it over that. And they had been giving us a real hard time over that. So that was the beginning of a real standoff between the union and the company, and that's kept itself going into the early 70s. Then they replaced the AEC manager out there with a young fella, 36-year-old guy named Billy Colston. And this guy was a brilliant man.
How do you spell his name?
Colston. He was in the nuclear industry. He was highly educated. Didn't take him any time at all to figure out what his own department had been doing.
And he was with the AEC.
Yeah, and he became the area manager. He called me in, and he introduced himself and everything, told me a little bit about himself. He said, "I've got a whole sheath of stuff here about you." And he says, "I'm here to tell you we're going to get all of this stuff taken care of, and we're going to start a new ball game." And he did. And he had a hard time with Dow. Dow, in the meantime, had brought in a lawyer from the home plant in Michigan to manage the plant out here, and him and the AEC guy immediately didn't hit it off too well. And it got to the point where the AEC guy says, in my presence, told the Dow guy, "Look, I am running this plant, and you're here working for us. If you don't choose to do what we're saying for you to do, then you kind of know what happens or what." Well, we were then called to a meeting shortly after that, a few days before Thanksgiving, and I think it was 1973 or 4. We were called to a meeting, and at that point, the chairmanship had switched over to Senator Pastore. Senator Pastore was a great friend of the Steelworkers and a friend of the president of the Steelworkers. So I got a call they wanted me in Washington as quick as I could get back there on that week. So I got there, and I was joined by the director out of Detroit, who was my immediate chairman over the jurisdiction here, and the legislative director from the Steelworkers, and we had a brief meeting at the president of the Steelworkers flew in, and we had a brief meeting at about 10 o'clock in the morning with Abel. He was the president, and just after 3 of us. And the meeting was to brief Abel about, and I was taken back because Abel had no idea about anything in the nuclear energy or nuclear power or nuclear weapons. And I thought, we're going to walk into a hornet's nest, because the only one here that really knows the plant is me. And immediately the director took care of that. We talked for just about an hour. They ordered sandwiches in, and we talked for an hour and a half. And we got in the cab and went over to the Capitol. And we had the meeting with then Pastore, and he had the Congress guy on his counterpart there. And also in the meantime, Dixy Lee Ray had been appointed as chairman of the AEC.
Did that make a difference?
Oh, yeah. Well, I see that day how much a difference it made. But we got there, and I was still nervous because I felt that this was our only chance. That if we didn't come across like we really knew what we were talking about, we were going to not get a second chance at it. And the labor management relations had come to a very, very bad ground. It was getting rougher all the time. But we got in the meeting, and we got the introductions done with it, everything, and Abel and Pastore started talking with each other. And I became totally amazed that in the hour and a half that we spent with Abel, Abel started conversing with the senator like he'd been at Rocky Flats for 30 years. And he just went beautiful. Then the legislative guy come in, and then the senator said, "Do you have anybody you can get a hold of that works at the plant that we could talk with here?" Abel said, "He's sitting right here with me." So they asked me some questions, and we had another half hour or so of brief talks, and he called his girl in, and he says, "Get Dixy Lee Ray over here." So we left at that point. And we got up, and Abel said to my boss, he said, "You just seen the end of Dow Chemical." Well, about 2 days later, the front page of the Rocky Mountain News says they put the Rocky Flats up for bid. And of course that was all threaded into that the labor relations picture is what they really used, as it just gotten out of hand and out of control. So when the senator asked me, I said, we've changed unions 3 different times out here, Senator. And I think it's time now that you try something else. And he picked up on that, I guess. And anyway, we got Rockwell. Well, Rockwell, when they came in, they knew what the problems were. I mean, they were told, I guess, what the problems were. And we began to work those out with the inclusion of Colston from the AEC. We got things back on a track after about 6 months. Everything was back and running very well. For the most part, in my opinion, it ran pretty well for most of the years that Rockwell was there. We had problems. We had safety concerns, but we had a lot better way of getting them resolved. And when we did have a difference, there was no great big shootout as to whether we go to the arbitrator or not. We just took the case, wrapped it up, sent it down there. Every case that I can recall, we got back a decision that was smart, told us that the guy heard the case and listened to the facts, and there's a couple of them they didn't agree with us on, but for the most part they did agree. So it was a whole new life out there after that.
Do you think that, as you look back on it, do you think that there are any things that you wish the union had been able to do differently, or any ways in which the union fell down in terms of either protecting workers or protecting the community?
If they wished we'd have done more?
Yeah.
I think because of the various stuff that was going on in the newspapers, I think anybody that was interested in the general public, I think they knew that we were fighting with them most of the time. And we were fortunate to have Channel 9 at that time. We had Bob Nelson and Bob McNichols, and the guy that just was in the headlines here not long ago that had the ruckus with Channel 7, Dave Minshaw. Those guys were all reporters at that time. And they quickly started reporting the facts. They started giving us our time, and instead of editing what we said, they were using what we said and let it fall where it will. And we had a lot of chance then, and I think the people then understood the types of things that we were being forced to fight over, that we were doing everything that we could do for safety out there. And I don't know if they felt we could have done any more or not. I guess I feel you could always do a little bit more, but when you're in a situation like that, it depends also on the other side. I mean, if they're not receptive, it's a tougher fight, a longer fight. If they are receptive, you can get some things done pretty fast. And I still, with Rockwell, for the most part, we weren't in the newspapers very much because we were resolving them, the issues out there pretty well. We never had a work stoppage with Rockwell. whereas we'd had several with Dow. So, yeah, I think the general public, those who were afraid of Rocky Flats, who didn't like it, probably there was nothing that anybody could have done that would have been okay with it. But I understand that. But for the average person, I think they know we were fighting our life out there for safety. Because every time there was a significant happening in which somebody got exposed or got hurt, we were deep involved in that. And I think the public knew that.
When you look back at your work at Rocky Flats, what do you think was the best thing about working there?
Well,
or the best things?
Going back and put my lot younger shoes on, it was an interesting place to work. I felt, especially when I first came there after coming out of the Navy, I felt that it was that they really took steps for safety, because what I was doing is looking at the rules and listening to the rules that were being read to me, and realizing later that it was a lot of talk. But the excitement was there, a lot because of the unknown. Because when I went to work there, you rarely talked ever to anybody in another building. I mean, you were in a building and that was kind of your place. When I got the job I wanted, I picked out the job that I felt that I wanted to do, and it took a while for me to get there because of seniority issues and organizational issues within the union. But I finally got through the right seniority system and got the job. That took me around a lot. And that gave me access to all of the buildings. So there was a big challenge there, finally beginning to be able to see the whole process. And I was really taken back by that, to watch the whole process, because you have all of these thoughts in your mind. First of all, it's a brand new thing altogether. I mean,
the process.
Well, they just used the bomb in '45, so it's not that far back from when I started there that everything's still kind of fresh. So it was exciting in that way. I got to meet a lot of great people. I met a lot of very smart people, and I attribute that somewhat to the degree that the security clearance was, especially in the first 25 years or so, where, I mean, you just didn't get in unless you were almost a virgin. I mean, it was just that tight, everything up and down the line. I mean, they went back and talked to everybody in the little town that I lived in, and I was really nervous about that. I was not the most behaved kid in town. And I was really nervous about all of that. But later on, when we had access to, and it was years later that you got access to those records. And I wish I could have went around to some of those old people that I knew so well, because every one of them just gave me a shining blessing. And so all of those people having to have that kind of clearance, for the most part, made them friendly, although some were more talkative than others. There was a little bit of camaraderie about that badge that I think, like any special unit in the military feels, and that provided a good living. I mean, we worked very hard at building a wage package and structure and a benefit structure to go with it. I had some really smart, educated people from the Steelworkers. When the Steelworkers came in 72, picking up what was the mine workers, which was good. The mine workers were the first best union we had. Then they merged with the Steelworkers. We had some really class acts that came in and educated me and my group about pensions, insurance, and all of those issues, safety, civil rights, and all of those issues. And they worked with us until we got trained and until we got our first signed agreement, which was very new to anybody out there, to have a signed agreement on your pension, to have a signed agreement on your health care benefits, a signed agreement on civil rights procedures, on safety procedures, and all of that. We had a contract which was really modeled for the whole labor movement. Our contract was used all throughout the labor movement because of its complexity in addressing each of those issues and having those issues signed and enforceable by either arbitration or by the courts. So that made it a ladder in which we were always able to climb a step. And my guys, on the other hand, were smart. I had a very smart group of guys with me who agreed that we should not get greedy, that we should try to go a little bit at a time and build, because everything costs money. Anything that's any good, all the way back then, it still costs money. While other plants were barreling away at wages, and we had our group of people that was screaming, well, they're making $2 an hour more at Hanford, they're making $1.50 an hour more at Oak Ridge, Tennessee. We took the position other than that. We took the position of taking that $1.50 and that $2, and we were putting it in pension. Because a pension plan is just like a savings plan. And you could write anything you want to write, but unless there's money in the bank when you get there, there's no pension. Insurance benefits are, you could write a book on them and still have nothing. And we were taught you don't negotiate Blue Cross or Metropolitan, or you negotiate a level of benefits. Then whatever company they choose to administer that is stuck with that level of benefits. So we walked down that road all the rest of the way. And when we got to 1976 and on into the 80s, we had then 2 programs, 3 programs, that the only thing we had to do after that, all of the tight work was done, is to put the pluses on, polish it up a little, polish it up a little. It became, instead of putting 50 cents an hour into it, we could put 10 or 15 cents an hour into it and keep the thing building. For example, right now, the pension benefit is $54 a month times each year of service. That started out at $3. The insurance benefits, and it's fully funded. The insurance program started out at a few dollars a day for the doctor and a few dollars a day they'd pay the hospital, to one now that is almost cradle to the grave for the retirees and all benefits that they go to bed on, that they don't have to sit and worry. They know pretty much exactly what their program's going to pay.
So that must be a great satisfaction to you.
And so there was a lot of things that we were able to do that way that are still alive, and they will be alive after the plant closes. I mean, there's a lot of none of the pensions are in jeopardy. We believe now that we've got the insurance benefits pretty well put away because of the politics. You never know with each administration how they're going to look at stuff like that. But we have a number of things signed again, lifetimes type stuff that I believe they believe that we could get a judge to enforce it if it comes to that. I don't think they want that. I think they're working something out right now where we will have a steady administration of the benefits after the plant finally closes all the way. So it's things that we did that have long since expired at some of these other plants. They did not prepare for the future. They certainly didn't prepare for the plant ever closing. We did. I have to be honest and say I don't know that we ever paid a whole lot of attention to a plant closing. But it's not much different in a plant closing than a guy retiring. For the guy that's retiring, the plant's closing. So we took each individual like that and said, as each individual retires, we take care of him and his family for the rest of their life. And we call it the cradle to the grave. We did that. We finally put the finishing touches on that in about 1981 or 82. And it's still that way today, and I don't think it'll change.
Great. Now, looking at this from the opposite point of view, as you look back on your particular work at Rocky Flats, what do you think were the worst things about working there, or the bad things, or the worst thing?
The worst things was seeing people that, because they didn't use even the meager safety stuff that we had, later became exposed or got hurt. The protective equipment that we had when I started there wasn't a lot, but it was substantial compared to nothing. It's very substantial compared to nothing. There were people who began skirting even that. Respirator was never totally comfortable. So it's kind of hard to look back and see some of the friends that you had that might not have had to go through what they did. I don't know if they would or not, but they might not have. And then there was the people who were hurt bad, the people who were killed. Those were the worst times when we had to go through something like that. And for any guy that was in a position I'm in, hard to see somebody lose their job. I mean, that was one of the toughest things for me to deal with, was when somebody couldn't behave enough to keep a good job and lost it. I became emotionally involved in that myself. Some of the others did not. Some of the others were a little bit more hard about it and said, you know, if they can't do that, Jim, you got to turn your head and say, you know, and I tried to do that. I tried to work with the company that way, but I always found myself back in the thick of that fight, trying to save the person. And I guess, looking back, tried to save the person sometimes from himself. Because there were a few cases where I succeeded and then it got worse, not better. I wound up a bigger disaster than I had on my hands the first time. So those were really about the only bad things that I remember. There were some tough times, but those weren't bad. Those were just tough times that a lot of people have to go through. And
how did you personally feel about the product of Rocky Flats? The
what?
The product, the trigger, the working in a nuclear
I always
weapons
looked at
plant.
that. I always looked at that as part of whatever the political geniuses at the time in the world decided the rest of us were going to live with. I looked at that as something that was dictated by people far distant from any of us. I looked at it like I was looking at my counterpart in China or Russia or the UK. They're all in these plants doing what I'm doing because their country has decided that's what they're going to do, and you know, everybody decided we were going to have a Cold War. I don't think that was Russia's fault or our fault. I think it was all of their fault. I think they were all getting that way, and my fear is developing there again now. that we're beginning to see the signs again now that people want to fight, and it's going to lead to something else, whether it's another a spread of nuclear weapons or something else. I think the world better take a look and tame itself back down again before we go through all of that again, because that was highly costly to everybody in the world and everybody here. So I always looked at it like it was not a choice really of whether this country did it or whether we decided to walk off the job and not do it. That would have had no effect whatsoever. So we had to posture ourselves that way. I had one son, for example, that later left Rocky Flats because his conscience would not let him work there. He just didn't like the stuff. And we talked, and I said, maybe that's the best thing for you, because there's two things you can't be. You can't be intentionally loose with the stuff, and you can't be afraid of it. And if you really are afraid of it, then you really do believe in your own mind that you shouldn't be here, then my thing is to tell you, find a job, and then when you find something else, leave here. And that's what he did. So everybody had different thoughts. There were some that did not have any trouble with it at all. Most of those guys that were World War II veterans, you never heard a crank out of them. I mean, they just thought this had to be done. They were going to do it no matter who liked it or not. So it was a round robin of thinking out there, and there were people who generally did not like what they were doing.
Do you think workers ever thought about, what if this particular bomb that I'm making today is detonated?
They knew this. They knew that it couldn't happen out there. But I don't think they gave any thought to the fact of which were, 99% of them would not see that final product, even as it left here. And it was not finished when it left here. So I don't think that was an issue that could even really come to their mind. I think there were a lot of people who thought about the use of them and how they would think, and I don't think any one of them could give you an answer to that, about how they would think if one actually had been used after they started working there. I think each one of us had our thoughts about that. And
what were yours?
My thoughts were just, I wondered how I would feel. Because I didn't know, I wasn't sure. Because I knew a lot of people that thought we were doing the wrong thing. There were a lot of people in the community that didn't think we should be making those things. And I understood that. But at the same time, you were dealing with the Rocky Mountain Arsenal that was making nerve gas, and they were finishing those weapons out there. I mean, those weapons were pretty much ready to go. The nerve gas and the GB, all of that was. So I wondered how those guys felt. And I had some relationship with those guys within the union, and they, for all practical purposes, were same kind of people as we were. I think they probably weren't really happy with what they were making, but they accepted the fact they were going to be made, and that they were being made elsewhere around the world. And you always kind of come back to that and maybe that's the military that comes back out, is that you do what you got to do to protect us here. Because that's drilled into you pretty good, whether it's the Army, the Navy, or the Marine Corps, or whatever. Your first belief rapidly becomes why you're there is to defend this country, period. And you're sworn to do what the president orders to be done for the period of time that you're there. And so I think they all kind of had those feelings. that they were just part of a program that this country decided they had to undertake. Along with the fact that I think probably President Eisenhower was probably the best guy at the time when this plant opened up. He was so popular that I think a lot of people said, you know, it must be okay. It must not be that bad or he wouldn't do it. We must really need it or he wouldn't do it. Had there been a guy like this guy in there now, I think there'd have been a lot of resistance coming from everywhere. But I think when you had a guy like Eisenhower, who everybody knew wasn't out looking for another war, and he believed that very deeply, whereas they would not have believed that same thing out of MacArthur. If you'd have put the two in different spots like that, I don't think you'd have had the same results. But the people had that kind of confidence in Eisenhower that I think that had a lot to do with how Denver accepted it, because Eisenhower was superbly popular in Denver and in Colorado. You know that. There was just nobody that they liked better. So I think all of those things played the part. When I went back to New York City in 83, I think it was, and on the Today Show, when I was on the panel with the Catholic priest and a housewife from Washington State, where they loaded the submarines with weapons.
This was in 1983?
Yeah. I took that position with that day, that panel. I think they thought they were a little bit timid, because I think they thought I was going to come in and attack because they had different views than mine on nuclear weapons. I took the position that I respected their positions and that I understood them, and that I felt that I was doing was a job that was chartered by the government as a policy matter of this country, a defense policy matter, and that those people, that myself and those people with me out there that worked out there were simply doing a job that was requested to be done. It was going to be done one way or another because they felt it had to be done, and we were putting our trust in them, that they knew better what was happening. And then I used the same thing about the defense of the country, that we felt we were part of that we were part of the overall puzzle on the defense. That it broke the ice. It broke the ice really good, and Catholic priest was a very young guy and from Connecticut, and so when we got done, I asked him to go to breakfast with me. So we went to breakfast, and we had a very good hour together talking, and became pretty good friends after that.
That was pretty unusual at that particular time,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Because that was the time of lots of protests.
Yeah. And he was from that part of Connecticut, the little towns and villages and stuff, that I'm sure he was getting pounded before he went on that program to take them on, let them know how we feel type of thing. And really, we respected each other's positions right off the bat. And we had a very good panel that day. And I've never forgotten it. I got the tape on it, and they did a tape for me on it, and I've got that set aside so my kids have that. But how well that went that day, you know. So I never got back. I got back once to see the priest, and I missed him. He had just had to leave. I got there a day or so later. My son was in submarine school back there, so I didn't get to see him. But I talked to him. I talked to him on the phone. So yeah, that was an interesting trip.
Could you talk a little bit about the issues of women and minorities at Rocky Flats and how that impacted your work in the union?
Well, when I went to work there were, as far as in the, there were the secretaries and all of the others, the payroll and that. But when I went to work there, in the plant itself, there were about 7. 6 or so of those were women who were stuck in where they were sewers. They sewed up coveralls and did that kind of work. They were kind of stuck there. Then a few years later, they let a few of them work in the laundry. When I became president of the local, I started with the company about, and I didn't have much to work with because at that point all I got is these 10 or 12 people. But I went after them about letting them move further into the workforce, to the higher paying jobs, because those 2 jobs were down at the lower scale. And I had a hell of a fight with them. We had a hell of a fight with them. And it went on, and we gradually started getting more, but they still wanted to relegate them to jobs that were, you can work around the airplane, but you can't get in it.
This is women you're speaking
Yeah, we just kept saying, that's just not good enough. So then we began seeing we got agreement out of them to let some of them work in some of the laboratories on the non-plutonium part of the plant. So we began looking at that as the key to this door is kind of the same thing as what we did on the benefits and some of the other stuff. We got to go after them every month or every 2 months. Then let them alone for a little while, but we got to keep going after them. Pretty soon we were looking at 75 or 80 women, Then it got up around 100, I guess. And something went wrong with one of my guys I had a committee of 7. At that time, the unit was about 2,200, 2,300 people. So I had a committee of about 7. Something went wrong with one of them, got sick or left. But for a period of time, I appointed a woman. And all hell broke loose. The company just didn't want a woman in the grievance room. They didn't want any women in that room hearing, I don't know what they had up here going on, but that was really a stumbling block. But I said, I'll tell you what, you run the plant. Tell her to get out of here then. I'm not going to. I got a right to 7 people. Right now she's one of them. So, they fumbled and bumbled around. They didn't really want to tell her to get out of here. Because at that time, that there were people then beginning to use the National Labor Relations Board. Instead of letting them sleep down there 7 days a week, people were starting to go to them. So then in about 1985, I guess it was, and all of the top jobs in the union were usually filled by men. The safety committee had became a prize kind of thing. There was the 3 guys on the safety committee, and so I called in a friend, and I said, Nancy, I want to put you on the safety committee. She said, are you sure? I said, yeah, I think it's time. So I put the letter out, sent the letter to the company, and sent the letter to the 2 co-chairmen of the safety committee that I was appointing Nancy James as one of the 3 people on the safety committee for the union. After I come back from lunch, I got them standing in line, And I knew what was coming, you know. So they got in my office, and first of all, you know, they started off all wrong. They had the wrong spokesman. And he closed the door and he said, "Jim, we're here to tell you we demand that you remove that woman from the safety committee."
And these were,
Huh?
who was complaining here?
The rest of the safety
The rest
committee,
of
and then
the-
of course they brought a bunch of supporters with them.
Ah.
I said, "Well, you know, you guys, if you really want to be that way, it's up to you." I said, "But the appointment stands. I'm going to support her, and all of the rest of the elected officers here are going to support her. And if it turns into turmoil, then you know you might as well give me your letter, because I'm not changing my mind. You're not going to change my mind. It's time to have one of the gals on there, and the time has come. It's now, and I'm doing it now. You know." And they left. Then they came back again. "Well, what about if you could make her an alternate?" I said, that's not what I did. I said, I made her a full-fledged member of the committee, and that stands. He said, "Well, we don't like it, and we're probably not going to work with her." I said, "Well, two other guys will. If you guys don't want to, a couple of other guys will. I think you're being very childish, and I think you ought to take her, work with her, and make her succeed." And I said, you could really get behind my back and almost make her resign because she'll give up. And that's going to take some effort because she doesn't give up easy. But if you want to do that, all you're doing is hurting us and yourselves and showing the company that we really don't deserve that kind of responsibility. So they left, and there was a brief period of up and down, and you know, then one of the guys really started to work with her, kind of put the other guy in a corner. He then knew that if he didn't, that he was gone. So they began working with her, and she became a very excellent safety representative. It got to the point where a lot of people were asking for her by name. So that was the biggest job. After that, we had women everywhere. We had them in the plutonium buildings if they wanted to go.
Did you ever have any personal worries that women shouldn't be in the plutonium building, or how did you?
We left that option to them. We had experts talk to them if they were of childbearing age. We had them tell them to be honest with us. If they were planning on having children later, they might want to rethink and stay out of that particular area and stay in the others. And they made their own decisions that way. The company did work well with us that way. And there were some who just said, "I want to go where the guys go. I want to be where the action is." You know, and we left it up to them. But if they had any reason to believe they shouldn't work there, they didn't have to. We'd make sure their seniority would take them to a like job somewhere else. We didn't upset anybody else's seniority. We just moved them in a slot that would come open. So that we never had any big trouble with. We had more trouble with a couple of them that the doctors felt really shouldn't, and they insisted on still working there, and those never really did get resolved, I think, to anybody's absolute happiness. I think they let them both work there. And as far as I know, there was never any complaints from them later. They never come back with any lawsuits or anything like that. So that didn't seem to be a problem.
Why did the doctors not think they should be there?
Pardon?
Why did the doctors not think they should be working?
If they were considering having a child, or if they were pregnant, so they worked out an agreement that if they became pregnant, they would notify the medical director, And then they would further discuss that, and possibly with the person's own doctor, and try to go from there. It took me out of the picture then, and I was happy about that, because that wasn't really my kind of a shot to call anyway. Usually the two doctors got a resolvement that at the second trimester, pull them back and temporarily put them in another area, something like that. The plant's general doctor was going pretty much on the advice of the lady's personal doctor. So they got those kind of things worked out. And there were a few cases where her doctor would say he'd rather not go in the area until after the delivery. And all of those things seem to get put together pretty good.
How about any issues with minorities?
We had a lot from the outside. Again, I had people come to my office from I don't know where sometimes. And the first thing they would say was they were demanding that a third of this or a fourth of that. I said, don't come in that way. Because I'm not in a position to just take 10 positions or 10% positions off the seniority list. I said, there's some things that I don't have any control over. I said, yeah, we had a lot of flare-ups over the minorities, and some of them were pretty tough to work out because the opposition was heavier, pretty much wide open with the company. The company was fighting wide open against all of that. It was the government finally come in and tamed them down.
You mean the company was fighting the issue of recruiting more
They
minorities?
didn't think they had to deal with that issue at all. They were using everything. The clearance, the experience, anything you can think of to use that they were using to disqualify some. And we just took the position: if the person comes in with the right experience that you require of everybody else, and the job's open, you give it to them. As a rule, we got quite a few minorities that way. And the only time you had a lot of trouble was when it come layoff time, because sometimes there was still some of them at the bottom. Well, all of us were at the bottom at one time. And we just dug in our feet for the most part there and just said, look, seniority is a system forever that has 50% of the people like it and the other 50% aren't sure about it. And gradually you get from one position to the other because of the natural way things go. And that's pretty much what happened, is they began to climb on the seniority list. They began to fight for their position of seniority. They seen what it was, and then they then knew that what they had been told was wrong, that they had better protection on a job when they came, did the job, did it well, moved up through the ranks, crossed the bridge where they had seniority enough to stay when the smaller layoffs came along. So, we got to the point where I had little trouble with the minorities. That way, I mean, they seen how the system worked and they liked it. So the company, I don't think, ever did really like it. That, the government came in and they got a little bit out of hand on that too, on the minority issue. The government was...
Now, the government, that wouldn't have been the AEC.
Yeah,
that was the AEC.
Well, they called it.
Yeah, okay.
3 different names later, yeah.
I'm going to stop us. Okay? You need to change tapes.
This is a continuation of the oral history with Jim Kelly on December 10th, 2003. Well, Jim, we were just talking in our little break about the issue of... Hannah, do you want to pose the question?
Sure. The issue, I have heard from other people that when women came to work in the plant in large numbers, there were issues with what they wore and the laundry, and they initially started wearing men's clothing, and then they wanted women's underwear and bras, and you were going to tell us a little bit more about it.
Everybody wore coveralls, boxers, surgeon's caps, white socks. And down the road, as we got some of the younger people, the younger women coming in, And frankly, I was not ready for it. I had no idea it was coming. But we started getting it, that they wanted regular women's underwear. And the first time I took that to the table with the company, I mean, it was, they couldn't really stay in the room. They were just stunned. And I brought up, I said, they want company, you won't let them wear their own clothes. I let into it, but you won't let them wear their own clothes back there. They feel they're entitled to have their own kind of underwear and their own bras that you buy if that's what you want. How are we supposed to ask somebody what size bra you wear? I said, they'll write it down and tell you what kind. I said, get the women in the laundry, let them keep the list. It's mostly women. We got some guys in the laundry too now. So, you got some women in the laundry. Let them take the list, whatever. I said, you want me to take the list for you? I'll take the list for you. But we went on for about a month, meeting every week or so. The grievance committee met. And
this was a formal grievance?
no, we had what we called a plant problems meeting. That was issues that were not in the grievance procedure. Like maybe the food was not as good as it should be, or we took that up as a plant problem. And the company, of all times, the company had that macho group. They had 6 people or so on their committee, and save one or two of them, the rest of them were machos. I mean, talking panties and bra to them guys was just beyond and below anything they wanted to talk about. But finally, anyway, it got down where the labor relations manager says, we're going to put this notice out. And I read it, and it was a fumbled up notice about trying to let them know that they were going to provide certain types of clothing for both female and male employees. They were doing everything they could. I said, as long as the women know you're going to give them their bras and panties, you don't have to put out an all-points bulletin trying to say what you're going to do, because you've just showed everybody that you're hiding something. So then they just decided, okay, we'll go through the supervisor. I said, that's the right way. Go through the supervisor and the stewards. We had some. By then I had some women stewards too. I said, let the stewards and the supervisors go tell the gals, you're going to get your own kind of underwear, and they'll be calling you in, or somebody will be talking with you, and they'll get it all put together. And after that, it went. Never heard another word.
So did the plant buy them underwear, or did
Yeah.
the women buy their own?
Nope, they bought them.
And did they have to change the laundry in any way to?
No, the laundry just kept doing the same thing. They kept them separate. Well, the laundry, see, they had your locker number on your coveralls. When they washed your coveralls, they went back. You got the same coveralls usually. Then they changed that later on, but I don't know how they worked it out with the. They probably still had a system like that with the underwear, where they got their same underwear back all the time, because that was no big problem to the people in the laundry. But it was another one of those issues that was fun, because you never expected anything like that to even come up. And we had first supervisor we got was a little black lady named. I can't remember the nickname she had, but they said, you're not coming in our locker rooms. And she looked a little bit like, not much taller than Gary Coleman. And she says, oh yes, I am. I've been told what to do, and I'm going to do it. So she'd come and she'd go rapping on the door, and she'd send a guy in there to make sure there was nobody in there, that she'd prop the door open and go in inspect after her janitors had been there. They still didn't like that idea. Then, of course, there became another woman in another building who was doing that. So then after that, it comes up in the union meeting, when are you going to stop these women from coming in our locker rooms? I said, I'll give you that job. You want to take that job, we'll give that to you. You go work that out with them. I said, never hear no more about that either after that.
So her job was to inspect the locker room for
After it had been cleaned.
Okay, to make sure that
Yeah.
everything was proper. And were there separate women's and men's locker rooms at that point?
Yeah.
Now, wasn't there some issues when the women worked in the plutonium buildings, when they became contaminated with the showers?
Yeah, they fixed that. They got everybody out of there, and we by then also had female radiation techs, and they were on all shifts pretty much. There was at least one was available. So they would isolate. The shower was kind of isolated where they could curtain it off anyway. So they would just have a couple of people stay out and not let anybody in there while they were in there get the girl showered and everything. And if they had to go further treatment, it meant getting them redressed and get them out there. That was never a problem. We got that worked out pretty good.
What about, now, they said that when you first got contaminated, you had to strip down.
That was a problem, and as far as I know, with the few people that happened to, there was no problem. And I'm not sure that the kind of thing you're talking about, I don't think any of them were ever involved in exactly that kind of a thing. The rest of the times that it would happen, there would be a way to compensate. There were jobs where they had to bring them down to full naked right away. I don't think they had any of them in that job. That was in the filter banks and stuff like that. And for other reasons too, I don't think they had to let the women go in there. First of all, if anything happened in there, you had to have pretty good strength to even get yourself in a position to be helped out if something started falling in. So I don't think they ever put any women. Pretty sure they never put a woman in there, in that job or right around it. The other jobs that they would get contaminated at, they could usually handle that. They could usually get people there and everything. But there was a few jobs where it was questionable which men to use. And for a lot of times, they used the same guys that got skilled at that particular deal. And
Because that was particularly hard, physical.
it was better done by somebody who had done it over and over again. Same as a technician. I was a technician there when they were bringing them out. It was very, very meaningful to me to be able to do that job. If I was going to do that job every time they did it, it was also very meaningful to me to have the operators and the maintenance people that had done that job before. We became, on that particular kind of job, we became a team. We knew each other's mannerisms. We knew each other's communication. They knew what I was saying, what I meant by what I was saying. I knew what they meant by what they were saying back. And it became much easier than having a new crew all the time. And there were some, even the job that I did, there were some people that were afraid of those jobs.
Could you describe like a typical day for you as a radiation monitor? That was your job, mainly.
It depended on where you were, but for the most part in the production building, it was just all over the place, servicing people who were doing various jobs in the dry boxes, removal and entry into the dry boxes, materials getting out, getting hot, getting on the floor or something, constant surveillance of everything, constant changing of the air monitoring system to make sure that the air was there was nothing moving in the air that was hot, things like that. as you got outside, the jobs outside of the operational buildings, that was taken like all the way from Boulder, Lafayette, all around the region. Top of the customs house, we went out and we changed air sampling systems on a rotating basis to see what the air was doing around Denver and around Boulder, Lafayette, Louisville.
So that was part of the radiation monitors job.
Yeah, I did that. That was part of our training program. We had to do that for 6 months. We had a kind of an apprenticeship, and 6 months of it was learning that. And there was always a crew of 3 or 4 doing that. And we'd bring those samples back, run them through the counting procedures, match them up against the last days or the last weeks to see if anything was changing. We'd do them on a repetitive basis if Japan, or not Japan, but if Russia or China or any of those countries tested a weapon, we would go out and we would do the monitoring because we could see the test. We could see the test as right after they did the test, we would, within a short period of time, our filter bank on our machines would start showing the results of that. So anytime they did a test, we were out more often.
So was it air?
Yeah.
There's air filters that you had stations and.
Yeah, we had portable pumps that public service had provided power to. Those pumps pulled in a certain amount of air. You could set the air you wanted. Like we had them pulled at 2 CFM all the time in the outskirts of that, and we could tell when there had been a test.
Were you testing soil and water as well, or
Yeah,
just
we tested the water out of a number of creeks and reservoirs.
So that was also part of the radiation
Yeah, we did
monitors
that
job.
too. And then we later turned the water over to the labs because they were the ones taking it back. We had to take the water back to the labs to test. We tested the other stuff, so it just made sense to turn the water over to the labs, let them take the water because they were going to take it and do the testing on it anyway.
Was it the radiation monitors that discovered the tritium? Or was that, I thought that was out, who originally discovered the tritium in the creeks?
It was us that blew the whistle. But see, that Dow went into denial for several days. They had a big press conference with the media and said that tritium did not come from Rocky Flats. It came everywhere. And I got called in by the Colston. Colston said, Jim, you know, it came from here. He said, these guys are stupid again. And he called another press conference. He gave them 4 or 5 days to straighten things up, and they just wouldn't do it. They just kept having one news release after another denying it. He calls a press conference and says, it come from here. And you know, that was another thing that really did him in with Dow, because that made him really look bad. Because the guy that heads the whole place up comes out and says, yes, it did come from here. And you know, that's one of those things where you could live forever and not figure out why would they deny that? Well, coming clean would have made a lot more sense. Because they didn't release it purposely. It wasn't even supposed to be here. Came in on a railroad car. So all they would have had to say is, you know, was we were getting a shipment and there was tritium in the car. And instead of that, they denied it come from here at all. But that's the way it got sometimes.
I have a question. With your work as a radiation monitor and seeing how tests in Russia would show up in the air, how did you feel confident that a plant like Rocky Flat should be in the area it was in? And you know, did those feelings change over time as the protests arose? Or?
Do I think you should continue it?
Well, I guess I have two questions. One is just how your feelings about radiation changed, having been a radiation monitor and seen how it would be in the air when there was a test in Russia. And then my second question is whether that changed your feelings about production at Rocky Flats, and when it stopped, how you felt about it.
No, because outside of the 2 fires, nothing was ever abnormal, except the testing. Mm-hmm. And of course, when we were testing too, we get a lot faster, of course, but no, that wouldn't have changed anything in my mind at all. It's the 2 fires. There was some significant change, mm-hmm. which really was more close to the plant than out in the surrounding areas. In fact, the '69 fire, very little there. Most of what got out in the fires was '57, when the filter banks burned. '69, I got there right after the fire started. And they were still working on it. In fact, I got set up on top of 76 to do the scan around all the pipes and the different exhausts and things up there, because 76 then had a brand new filter system, different than that. And I was getting nothing up there. I was signaling them back down on the ground that I was picking up nothing. I went around to every possible outlet and stuff to where anything could have gotten through. It would have been coming out of those ducts. We kept constant surveillance up there on that. And what little bit got out of the '69 fire was again in a situation like Dorothy was talking about, where the initial people that was coming out had to be stripped down. And at that point, we're out near the entranceway because everything else was so bad off right after you got inside the door. And once they got that controlled, there was little of anything got then out of the building. I'm more concerned about that now than I was then. I'm more concerned now about what's maybe going to be left there. Much more concerned than I was at the time when I knew it was being controlled and I knew there was enough people there to do it, enough people that knew what they were doing. I'm very concerned now about what's happening. I'm hearing all kinds of things from people that work out there now about the shortcuts that are being taken, about the rapid hurry to get out of there and get the thing closed, that they're doing all kinds of things and that probably shouldn't be done or should be done, that's not being done. That I think if what I'm hearing is right, there's going to be enough of it that somebody gets involved here before long. And if they don't, God help us, because there's a lot of bad stuff still out there.
When you say somebody's going to get involved, what do you mean specifically?
Right now, I'm saying what people are telling me right now, Dorothy, is that the health department in Colorado is turning their head the other way, that EPA, everybody's turning their head the other way. Well, you can only do that so long. If the right people start saying the right things, and that's going to happen, then somebody else will not turn their head. You'll get some higher levels in it. But I've been concerned for years that the state of Colorado and that plant management have been in bed together for a long time. I don't think you could trust the state of Colorado all the way back to maybe when Bob Seek was the director there. I think that's the last time you could trust the state health department, and that's quite a while ago. Ever since then, I think they've been playing footsie.
And you think the EPA has not?
Oh, I think the EPA is worthless. I think the EPA, we would be much better off right now without an EPA. Just fly by the seat of our pants than we are with this woman that's had it, and now this guy from Utah that's taking it over. I mean, these people are brutal with our environment, with things like this. I don't think that this guy that's coming into the EPA right now gives a hoot about Rocky Flats or what's there, or what's left there or anything else. I think that's the least of their worries. He's putting people in place that are of a mind structure to turn all of their attention to this thing going on in Iraq. He doesn't want anybody in there right now that's going to start giving him a problem about South Dakota or Mississippi or Colorado or anything like that. He wants everybody in his office dedicated to that one function over there, and that's kind of what's happening. And the rest of it just being let hang out to dry. I mean, that's my opinion, but it doesn't take too much to see what's going on. This company's they're gonna walk out of here with the biggest bucket of money you've ever seen, and the job is not going to be done. It's going to be far from done, and in fact, the most dangerous parts of it is still going to be left.
Do you think that there are any people working out there now who, as of now or later, would be whistleblowers, would talk openly about the things that they worry about?
I got to be candid with you, Dorothy. I don't know if them kind of guts exist anymore. I would hope that in that bunch, that when they find the problem right now with that is you got literally whatever's working out there. You got 90% of them that doesn't know anything about the plant. They've hired in the last few years, and they don't know what's happened out there. They have no idea what took place at that plant. The plant quit working in '89, and these people come even long after '95. They don't know what to look for. In a lot of ways, they're innocent. But I would still think that as they listen to the few that are there that know, and as they start learning and seeing for themselves, that there would be some of them that would speak out. But I'm not sure about that. I watched my union go to something I never thought I would see it go to. Never. Never did I think that the Steelworkers Union would fall back on their heels and just stand back and watch things happen like they have. I've always looked at that three kinds of people thing, You to make something happen, watch what happens, or wonder what the hell happened. And we're in the latter two. We're no longer people out there that are making anything happen. It's stand back and watch and wonder. Whether any of those people will speak out or not, I don't know. I would not bet on it. Because some of that should be happening now, and it's not.
So you feel that at this point the union is not
They're not doing anything.
advocating for...
Like they're not even there, Dorothy. Like they're not even there. One after another union members are telling me that. They still call me, they still come and see me. It's like nothing's there. The company's doing what they want, when they want, how they want. They're not being questioned at all.
So the role of the union, you would say, has really changed.
It's expired. I mean, you got 6 or 7 guys out there that are clustered away in a trailer somewhere that they go out there, they get out of there, and nothing happens in between. That's about what it is.
Do you think that's because of the change of mission, or just the state of unions in the country right now, or
No guts. I put it right where it belongs, Hannah.
Where?
No guts. No, they don't have it in them to fight back.
That's just the individuals you think
Yeah.
who are in charge?
Yeah, they could still be doing a lot. They don't have it in them. They're wimps. I mean, I got to be totally. I got to say it like it is. I mean, they're wimps. I had a few wimps along the way. We used to just put them away. Put them and forget about them. Because always had, never get more than one. Usually at any election, you get maybe one wimp that had slipped in there, but you just put him away, like you do a vice president sometimes. So you got 6 others there that are going to do it for you, but you can see what they are. They want to use the position for some other reason other than fighting for the people's rights or their benefits or anything.
Do you think it's gotten harder for unions in the last, say, 15 years to
I
do
don't
their
know.
jobs?
Well, they've had it too good. They've had it too good, Hannah. They've been spoiled. And they've had it too good. They haven't had to really fight. There's always been a group of people that did the fighting for them, that brought the contracts to them to vote on. That's all they ever had to do is show up at a meeting and they vote. They had another good contract. Now they're there where they're supposed to be the guys that are going in there and doing that, and it's just not there. The first contract that this crowd did, they come back. They had given back the cost of living. They had given back much of the seniority. They had given back the whole Christmas shutdown, which was the most popular thing I ever negotiated. It wasn't the most important thing, but the most popular thing I ever put together with my group was the full Christmas shutdown, where they had the Christmas holidays off with their families. We had that for years. That was cemented in there, and nobody was allowed to touch that. First time to the table, the company took it off them. And you know, it's sad to see that, because it took a lot of work to get it. And it took an extra lot of work to get the cost of living provision. We fought for 20 years to get that in there. We staged that in from a weak partial cost of living clause to a good one over a period of 4 or 5 years. The cost of living itself, when I left there, had generated like $6 an hour, $7 an hour over the years. Now it's not generating nothing because they don't have it anymore. That's how fast 2 cents, 5 cents, 10 cents, 3 cents a quarter adds up over a period of time. And it's a very good hedge against inflation, because when it was there, the cost of living would go up 20 or 25 cents a quarter. We had a few of those. Yeah, it's hard to watch all the work go back down the other way, but I don't know what to stop it either. I don't know how you do it. You can't put guts in people. That's one thing you can't do. You can't make them tough. You can't make them stubborn.
Do you think this is true throughout the nuclear complex? Yeah. Not just at Rocky Flats, then?
Not just at Rocky Flats. It's happened in Idaho and it's happened in Washington. And again, all the old leaders are gone. They've all gone, either retired or left for other reasons or died. And the new leadership coming in is just not willing to pick it up and do what has to be done. But all they really had to do is protect what they got. They didn't have to go out and create any new big deals. They had to just keep what they had, and that would have been fairly easy if they'd have been smart and stuck together and had a little bit of fire in their belly. They could have done that. They chose not to.
One other thing that we wanted to touch on, what do you think the impact was at Rocky Flats when production was stopped? Now, you weren't really...
Denial.
Pardon? Denial?
Yeah. Nobody believed this would ever happen, that this day would ever come that we're here now, including this one. I didn't think the government would do any different there than they do on anything else. They were staging the show for something. It sounded good at the time. And that because I had a good relationship with Admiral Watkins. And Admiral Watkins was basically making me feel like, you know, it was his position to get the plant running again. And as you notice, he did not serve a second term. Well, he wasn't going to serve a second term with Bush. He liked Bush, but for whatever reasons, he was going to leave, because we were concerned about that if Bush got reelected, was he going to stay a second term? And he told me no. We were very concerned about that. But I felt what I was hearing out of Watkins and what Bush was saying was something real and something political. That Bush was saying what he had to say because there was something going on and he needed to say that. I'm not really faulting him for what he said, but I felt at that time there was some kind of overriding purpose that he was saying that. And they really didn't mean a complete, this was really going to wind up being it, but it did. It turned out to be, yeah, he was serious.
Did you think that that production should have continued at Rocky Flats?
I don't know. I see they're going to build another one, so I guess time tells them they shouldn't have lost it all. I don't know, Hannah, what the answer to that is. I would hope, and again, going back, that's one of the things I'm worried about today, is I would have hoped that we would have learned the lesson from the Cold War, and that we would have really learned the lesson from Vietnam, not to do this again. And we not only did it again, but we're sinking faster and into a deeper quagmire than we did in Vietnam. And I'm really worried about this. What is it going to escalate to? Who's going to come up and say we can't do it this way? So we're going to have to do it this way.
Are you worried that it could escalate
Yeah,
to use of nuclear
I'm saying
weapons?
I'm saying that I think you have a higher possibility right now of eventually seeing some kind of nuclear weapon used than you did at any time during the Cold War. Because they know, Washington knows full well right now, we can't get out of this. Not the way it's going. Something different's got to happen for us to get out of this mess. And they know it. And they're trying to get through 2004 before the whole thing falls apart. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's going to be enough people killed between now and then. I think the people are getting tired of the daily 2, 3, whatever casualties coming in. Like yesterday, 58 wounded yesterday. There's too many people that's paying attention only to the 1 or 2 that's killed. Some of those kids that are getting wounded bad. They're ruined. And I think the country's going to pick up on that. They have to. They have to pick up on that. Or somebody's going to use a weapon that we don't like.
So I guess there's 2 questions with the stopping of production. There's, should they have stopped making those weapons altogether? And obviously there still seems to be a need for them since they're making them again. And then the second question is, should Rocky Flats have been should a plant like that be located in such a populated area?
That was Fort concludes that as you see it now, they knew it'll be down south. I think it was okay to build Rocky Flats when they built it there. I think they did a bad job of zoning after that. They should not have let everything creep up around it, because that's only natural. And when you build a new plant, IBM or anywhere, the houses will start creeping up around it. And they should have stopped that right there. They had enough property to do that. Mm-hmm. But anything new or anything that will never be done here, and it'll be done somewhere else. But I think, yeah, they're going to have to build sometime. Because they have a shelf life on them, just like some other products do. You know, they go bad after a while. And so, you know, I believe they'll have to build some.
Any other?
I guess maybe if you can just ask them about the buildings questions.
Oh,
just,
yes.
For the.
Yeah. The question here is, if you were handed a blueprint and told that, you know, the buildings in Rocky Flats were built in a certain way, do you think that there were changes that were made over time in the buildings?
Absolutely. Hundreds.
Can you describe a few of them? Or is that... Walls, rooms were reconfigured, electrical systems were relocated. Oh, anything you want to. 771 building was. And this wouldn't be in the blueprints then?
No, I doubt it at all. In fact, one of my friends that's now dead used to tell me that, Jim, if they ever come in here and use the blueprints to try to do anything, he said they're going to think they got the prints in the wrong place. He used to tell me that because he knew of so many that was going on in just the area that he was involved with. He was a supervisor later. He used to laugh about that. How about it? Switches were relocated, rooms were reconfigured.
And what kind of reasons would be
Just
for doing
just the
that?
times, what they needed to do to have the production changes that were going on. Things that they were going to do different required either a bigger this or a smaller that, or the room had to be designed a little bit different, a little bit longer, all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah, I think virtually all of the walls in 71 that I worked in, all except the perimeter walls, that there's been some kind of changes made to them.
And were those changes initiated by supervisors or by plant managers or the workers saying this isn't
Well,
working very well?
they had planners that went along with the operating designers and the people that were calling the shots on what we were doing. They would just sometimes down the road they would make a room differently in advance of a project that was coming in. They might have a year or 2 years notice on that, where a new system was going to be coming in, and they would change the whole area to fit that, so they'd be ready when they started doing it. Yeah, lots of that all over the plant.
Did the workers themselves, the hourly workers, ever make changes in terms of procedures?
It was some the smaller changes, but for the most part there were contractors. The big stuff was contractors. Yeah, there was contractors out there all the time doing something.
And did the union ever intervene and say, someone said this process isn't working properly?
Yeah.
Would you come in and say you need to change this line or you need to change this?
Yeah, they changed a line, put a new system of dry boxes in to better fit a project that was coming in. Yeah.
So that might be through the safety committee or through grievances as
Yeah,
well.
we had people involved in it to make sure everything was done right and safe when they got done with it. We didn't have anything to say about the design much. I mean, that was all done. Can we take just a quick break?
Sure.
Okay.
We'll ask you just one or two more questions. The question has to do with being exposed to radioactivity or contaminated. Did you have experience with knowing either yourself or other workers were contaminated?
Yeah.
Was that,
Well, the records on contamination, of course, you find that right away. Regular radiation exposures, that builds. They have the film badges, which nobody ever had much stock in.
oh really? What?
It's a piece of film, and they go by that film, by the exposure on it. In the earlier years, that's what you had. Then they come up with what they called a TLD type of badge, which was a refined, sophisticated system on your badge. I don't know how the government itself has indicated that the records are almost non-existent. That's what they've told me in my request for records. They're reconstructing mine right now. They're trying to do a reconstruction of my records because there just hardly isn't any. So,
Is that because there were changes made throughout?
it's partly because of the lousy job that the contractors did too.
So the film badges didn't really work?
Yeah.
And when you would wear the same badge every day, and if it...
They changed them periodically.
Okay, and then they were supposed to keep track of how much exposure was
Yeah.
on the film badge, and if you got a certain amount, you were...
The penetrating radiation was supposed to be tracked in that way. And they've admitted that they really didn't know what they were doing all that much, and that the records are very bad. I testified to the Armed Services Committee in 1992, and the DOE was there that day, and they had a doctor that stood up and admitted to the senators that the records were at best very poor. So that's not in dispute much. So those of us that have cancer, it's now a matter, I guess they're trying to, this is the bothersome thing is that they're going to decide which cancers are appropriately come under their responsibility and which don't. Now how they're going to do that, I don't know, but that's the part of it that is probably to the worker going to be the most unfair part.
Do you have a body burden of plutonium?
I don't have a body burden, no. Not that I know of. You know, personally, I think probably everybody that worked in 71 has. But, you know, they haven't been told that. Some of the people later on, like the 80s, late 80s and 90s, have been told you got a body burden. I don't know if they know if that's accurate or not.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no clear system for determining a body
There's no
burden.
system that's really good, Dorothy. Back there's none that was any good. It was just a exercise and I don't know, trying to make you feel better, I guess.
I think they did a better job with beryllium exposure.
Same thing with beryllium, they didn't have any monitoring for a while. None. They were not supposed to eat back there where they worked. They were eating back there. They were smoking back there. They were no mask back there. A lot of people have got borreliosis that really should not have it, but they got it. And that's what they're focusing on. They're not focusing on the cancer. There's too much of that. They're focused on the beryllium because there's, you know, that's the cheapest, least way out for them.
And I imagine it's easier to determine cause and effect than
Yeah.
like the plutonium.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Yeah, that's one issue. I'm sure there's 50, 60 different kinds of cancer. That's what bothers me is they're going to choose which ones they think they caused. Because most all of us, just one after another of us has got some kind of cancer. All of my friends have got cancer.
So,
All of us have got different kinds.
so do you feel that your cancer is related to working
I
in
don't
working
know.
class?
I don't know any more about that than I think they do.
You have prostate cancer or something?
I don't know who could tell me that.
Hannah was asking, you have prostate cancer?
Yeah. I think I've got it whipped. I think that's one thing I got whipped.
Uh-huh.
Because we get the heart and the lungs now. It's not quite that easy with them.
Did you were you contaminated? I mean, did you have incidents where you had to strip down, go to the showers, and be
Lots of times.
bleached? Lots of times.
Lots of times. Yeah, I was in that shower lots of times. And I had to go to medical lots of times where the shower didn't do it. And they used the mixture of bleach and stuff, particularly with hair. People with hair on your chest like that, I have. Use it. They had a bleach treatment that they used. That they would do that 3 times and then they would stop. Not very often was there still stuff there after the 3rd time, but sometimes there was. They just keep you there for a while and then do it again.
Was that painful?
But it was, yeah. I got very fair skin. So sometimes I went home looking like a beet.
Did you get used to it? I mean, was it scary to know that you were contaminated?
Wasn't scary, but it wasn't a good feeling either. Because every time that happened, you always wondered how much you might have taken in, even though you had the respiratory protection on. Some of the spills that I was in, I had to believe that I was probably taking in some. You also knew that Annie was a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't scary, but it caused you to think. And because I just always looked at it like you can't get that hot without some of it getting no matter how tightly you were secured, there would be some get in. Your respirators didn't fit everybody as good as they fit. Some they fit really good, some they fit pretty good. Some guys had trouble keeping a seal, consistently keeping a seal. You start off with one and then lose it somewhere. So yeah, it was a concern, a big concern. Not something that I didn't worry about, but I can't say it was scary because I already knew that it was going to, time to time it was going to happen to me, to somebody else.
Did it happen most often when you were a radiation monitor? Was that when you were exposed to
It happened mostly when you were in a production area, in a chemical area.
So it happened more to the chemical operators than, say, to the radiation monitors?
No, it would usually happen a lot to each because they were both there.
And those would be the two class of workers that would
Or
be
the
most
maintenance
likely.
people.
Or maintenance.
In some cases, lab people.
How would the lab people get?
A glove would puncture.
Oh,
Or what they call the B box would for some reason lose its pressure. Backfire on them or something like that.
what was a B box?
It was somewhere between a regular system and a dry box. It was a system that took air up very, very heavy, so that they had sliding doors on it, and they weren't working with the type of plutonium that they were working with on the floor over in the production area, so it was less likely to get out. But if that pressure changed, sometimes it'd drift out a little bit. Then you had a mess. Or if they lost the pressure, which didn't happen very often, but it happened a few times, where they lost the pressure. Yeah, there was all kinds of stuff. When the maintenance people would break into a line to replace a valve or something, something would be there that they weren't expecting was there, or they weren't planning on. And we'd get out and have a mess on our hands. That happened a lot where there were pumps. Stuff would get into pumps where these pumps were supposed to be sealed, where nothing could ever get in them, and this stuff would find a way in there. So we had all of them kind of difficult.
And this would be the pumps for?
Different things,
Different
machinery
things.
pumps, air pumps, flow pumps, just about any of that stuff. They bought the kind that were sealed, and they paid top dollar for stuff that probably would have been that way with any other material, but with the type of stuff we were using, it found a way out, it found a way in. It was tricky, very tricky stuff.
Anything else, Sam?
I think
We've kept you a long time.
Okay.
Is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion? Now, I know last time you made a nice statement about, this is what you believed in, but do you have any thoughts you would like to share
Well,
now?
I think this time I should tell you that I've liked this. I've enjoyed doing it with you. It's kept my memory a little bit sharper, and reliving it is not too bad, since I'm not having to do it again. No, I've enjoyed doing it and recalling the days and the months and the years of, and I liked my job. I mean, I liked being a representative of the people. I liked that. Wouldn't trade that for nothing. And as difficult as it was, and as troubling as it was sometimes, it was still something that I was able to do, that I wanted to do, that I think was able to help. I feel very good about all of our retirees having benefits, and that their pensions are livable. Those are things I take with me every day from it. That it was all worth it. It was all worth it. And I see that every time we get together. I get a hug from just about every one of them. That means more than anything to me, is to know that they're going home and they don't go home and worry about whether or not they're going to be able to go to the store, or whether or not they're going to be able to get their prescription filled. And that has become more of a comfort over the last few years, and even than it was before. So, knowing what some places that didn't do anything, that don't have anything, I'm glad we did it. I'm glad to be a part of doing that. And I had a lot of good people with me that helped me every step of the way. You know, you really find out loyalty. You really find out the people who are willing to work hard, and the people with guts, the people that's got it inside of them to fight for what is right and to get it. You know, you come out of there believing. You know, they can tell you no all they want to tell you no, but if you really want it and you band together, you get it. You'll get something like it. Or if you don't get it all, you'll get some. I wish that was better done today than it is being done today. You look at these people down at the janitors and things in these downtown buildings, they're getting a rough ride. They're doing a lot of hard work for literally no wages or benefits. That's not right. And I wish I could get out there in the thick of the fray with them. There was nothing I wanted more than to get out there and get involved in this Medicare fiasco. I sat here just itching to get somebody to get me in a car and take me somewhere and get me in the middle of that fight to try to help stop him from doing that to us. But everybody looks at you and says, your time has passed. You know, you got to leave that to somebody else now. That was pretty hard to hear on that issue. I wanted so bad to get out there and get amongst them. But here I am.
Well, maybe we should stop.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.